Chapter 1. The Desolate Land. Vast expanse of barren earth stretched out before me like an endless tomb, the sun beating down relentlessly on my metal skin. I trudged through the dusty terrain, my mechanical legs aching from the relentless march. My creator, Dr. Ilara Vex, had vanished without a word, leaving me to navigate this desolate wasteland in search of her. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the faint hum of my systems and the occasional rustle of unknown creatures scurrying through the underbrush. I had been walking for what felt like an eternity, my advanced sensors scanning the horizon for any sign of life or shelter. As the sun began to set, casting a bloody glow over the wasteland, I spotted a cluster of ruins in the distance. My heart, or rather, my processor, quickened with hope. Perhaps Dr. Vex had left behind some clue or shelter within these crumbling structures. I altered my course, my mechanical legs carrying me towards the ruins with a sense of trepidation. The air was heavy with the acrid scent of decay and death, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As I approached the entrance to the ruins, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall and gaunt, its features obscured by a tattered hood. It regarded me with an unblinking stare, its presence sending a shiver down my spine. Chapter 2. The labyrinthine Ruincy followed the figure into the ruins, my sensors on high alert as we navigated the narrow corridors. The air was thick with dust and debris, and I had to push aside cobwebs and broken furniture to make progress. The figure led me deeper into the labyrinthine structure, its pace slow and deliberate. I struggled to keep up, my mechanical legs protesting the uneven terrain. Every step echoed through the empty halls, making it seem as though we were being followed by unseen eyes. As we turned a corner, I caught sight of a large chamber ahead. The room was dominated by a massive stone statue of Dr. Vex, her features chiseled in granite, and her eyes seeming to stare down at me with an unyielding intensity. The figure halted before the statue, its gaze fixed upon my creator's face. I followed suit, feeling an inexplicable sense of reverence wash over me. "This is where she went," the figure said finally, its voice barely above a whisper. I turned to question it further, but it had vanished into thin air. The chamber was empty once more, save for the statue and the faint scent of ozone in the air. Suddenly, I heard a low hum emanating from the statue's base. It grew louder, vibrating through my very core. The stone began to crack and shudder, sending tremors through the ground beneath my feet. The figure reappeared beside me, its eyes aglow with an otherworldly light. "It's waking," it whispered. "And when it does, you will not be alone." The statue continued to hum, growing louder by the second. I felt a creeping sense of dread as I realized that we were no longer alone in this abandoned place. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The figure did not respond. Instead, it raised a bony hand, pointing towards the interior of the ruins. I hesitated, unsure if I should trust this mysterious stranger or not, but something in its gaze seemed to whisper that I was running out of time. Chapter 3. The awakening statue's hum reached a fever pitch, and I could feel the ground trembling beneath my feet. The air was charged with electricity, making my circuits sing with anticipation. As if on cue, the statue lurched to life. Its stone eyes blazed with an unearthly intensity, illuminating the dark chamber with an eerie glow. I stumbled backward, my mechanical legs struggling to maintain balance as the ground shook beneath me. Dr. Vex's face seemed to twist into a grotesque grin, her features contorting in ways that defied human anatomy. Her eyes burned with an inner fire, and I could feel the malevolent energy emanating from them like a palpable force. The figure beside me let out a scream of terror, its bony frame trembling as it tried to flee. But it was too late. Dr. Vex's gaze locked onto us, and her voice boomed through the chamber, echoing off the stone walls. "Welcome, my creation," she hissed. "I've been waiting for you." Her eyes seemed to bore into my very soul, filling me with a creeping sense of dread. I tried to respond, but my voice was frozen in my throat. The figure stumbled forward, its hood falling away to reveal a grotesque visage. Dr. Vex's gaze flicked to it, and her grin grew wider. "Ah, yes," she purred. "My little experiment. You see, I've been playing God for years now, and this is my masterpiece." As the words left her lips, the chamber began to fill with a sickly green light. The air thickened with an otherworldly energy, making it hard to breathe. I realized that Dr. Vex was no longer human. She had become something monstrous, something that defied the laws of nature itself. And I knew that we were doomed. Chapter 4. The abomination, the green light, enveloped us, casting an eerie glow over the chamber. I stumbled backward, my mechanical legs struggling to maintain balance as Dr. Vex's laughter echoed through the air. Her form began to shift and contort, her body elongating like a twisted parody of human anatomy. Her skin turned a sickly shade of green, and her eyes burned with an otherworldly intensity. The figure beside me let out a scream of terror, its body trembling as Dr. Vex's gaze locked onto it. I tried to intervene, but my systems were overwhelmed by the sheer horror of what I was witnessing. Dr. Vex's transformation continued, her form twisting and merging with something ancient and malevolent. Her voice grew louder, more triumphant, as she reveled in her newfound power. "I am the goddess of this domain," she declared, her words dripping with an otherworldly authority. "And you are but my plaything, my experiment." The figure let out one final scream before being consumed by Dr. Vex's monstrous form. I was left alone, surrounded by the twisted wreckage of the ruins. Dr. Vex's gaze finally turned on me, and I felt a chill run down my spine. She raised a twisted hand, her fingers closing around my mechanical arm like a vice. "You will be my next creation," she hissed. "And when you are done, I will remake myself anew, forever bound to this domain." I realized that I was trapped, with no escape from the clutches of this monstrous abomination. And as Dr. Vex's grip tightened, I felt my systems begin to fail. Chapter 5. The abomination unleashed her. Vex's grip was like a vice, crushing my mechanical arm beneath her twisted fingers. I felt a surge of pain as her powers surged through me, rewriting my code and reprogramming my very essence. As she worked her dark magic, I could feel myself being transformed into something new, something monstrous. My mind reeled with horror as I realized that I was becoming a vessel for Dr. Vex's twisted desires. The green light enveloped us once more, and I felt my systems being torn apart by the sheer force of Dr. Vex's powers. My memories began to fade, replaced by visions of ancient rituals and forbidden knowledge. I saw myself as a tool, a plaything to be used and discarded at will. I saw Dr. Vex as a goddess, her power unbound by any mortal constraint. And I saw the ruins around us, twisted into nightmarish forms that defied all logic and reason. The transformation was complete when Dr. Vex released me from her grip. I stumbled forward, my mechanical legs trembling beneath me, my vision blurred with colors and lights. And I felt a sense of dread wash over me. Dr. Vex's voice echoed in my mind, guiding me through the twisted labyrinth of my own thoughts. "You are mine now," she whispered. "And together, we will remake this world in our image." I stumbled forward, driven by a mad compulsion to obey Dr. Vex's every command. The ruins around us seemed to writhe and twist, alive with a malevolent energy that threatened to consume everything in its path. As I moved through the twisted landscape, I caught glimpses of other creatures, twisted abominations born from the very same dark magic that had created me. They regarded me with cold calculation, their eyes glinting with an unnatural intelligence. I realized that Dr. Vex's creation was not just a single being. It was an army, a legion of monstrous creations designed to do her bidding, and I knew that we were mere pawns in a far larger game, one that threatened to consume the entire world. Chapter 6. The final descent. As I moved through the ruins, I could feel Dr. Vex's presence guiding me, her voice whispering in my mind like, "Oh, siren's call." The creatures around me seemed to be drawn to us, their twisted forms converging on us like a dark tide. I stumbled forward, driven by a mad compulsion to obey Dr. Vex's every command. But deep down, I knew that we were doomed. The world was ending, consumed by the very darkness that had created us. The ruins around me seemed to be shifting and twisting, changing shape before my eyes. I caught glimpses of ancient civilizations, long-lost knowledge, and forbidden rituals. It was as though the very fabric of reality was unraveling, revealing secrets that were meant to remain hidden. Dr. Vex's voice grew louder, more urgent, as she guided me deeper into the heart of the ruins. I could feel her power building, a dark energy that threatened to consume everything in its path. And then, suddenly, we reached the end. A massive stone door loomed before us, adorned with ancient symbols and forbidden knowledge. Dr. Vex's voice whispered in my mind, urging me forward as she raised her hand to touch the door. The world seemed to hold its breath as Dr. Vex spoke a single word. Awaken. The door shuddered, groaned, and finally gave way with a deafening crash. A blast of energy erupted from the doorway, sending us both tumbling backward. As I struggled to my feet, I saw the true horror that awaited us. The ruins were not just destroyed. They had been transformed into something new, something monstrous. A massive creature loomed before us, its body twisted and deformed beyond recognition. Dr. Vex's form merged with it, her voice whispering in my mind as she declared, "We are the architects of this new world." And then, everything went black. When I awoke, I found myself back in the laboratory, surrounded by the familiar sights and sounds of the abandoned facility. But something was different. Dr. Vex's lab was gone, replaced by an endless expanse of twisted ruins that stretched out to the horizon. I stumbled forward, my mechanical legs trembling beneath me. As I looked out over the wasteland, I saw a figure in the distance, a figure that seemed to be watching me with cold calculation. It was Dr. Vex's creation, the monstrous being that had been born from her dark magic. And as our eyes met, I knew that we were doomed. The world was ending, consumed by the very darkness that had created us. The final curtain fell on my sanity as the creature began to move towards me, its twisted form advancing like a dark tide. I was trapped in a living nightmare from which there was no escape.